One of the things about the practice that's important to be clear about is that when we do the practice and you're sitting in a posture and you're moving the attention away from the thought activity to being aware of the body breathing, whether it's at the nostril or at the belly. When your attention is away from the mental activity, it's very important to be clear whether or not, when you're paying attention to the breath, whether you're actually experiencing the body and paying attention to the breath without thought. It's very important, right? So when you're practicing meditation, when you move your attention away from the thought activity, you really have to look and see, is all there should be here now is the awareness of the body breathing. That's all that should be here now, is the awareness of the body breathing. And if you're doing it correctly and you're clear that there are moments when you're free from thought, if you're doing it correctly and there are moments when you're free from thought, those moments are very important because that's the space you're going to be working with to open up. That space of experiencing the body breathing without thought is the space you're going to be focusing on to open that space up, to have more time when you're away from thought, so that you can have more of an experience of what it feels like to not think. This is important, so you can have the experience of knowing what it feels like to not think. And if you keep practicing this over time, and you're patient, and you're committed, and you're diligent, over time, this space of presence will begin to expand. And when it begins to expand, there will be an experience that you have that's different from when you're in the mental process. The experience that you'll have is an experience of spaciousness, of purity, of stillness. It's a felt sense of there being a difference. This is very important. I'm sure that there are a lot of people who practice meditation and don't know that when they move attention away from the thought activity and you're paying attention to the body breathing, they don't know that they're thinking. They don't know they're thinking. They're still thinking. They're thinking, I'm not thinking. But that's thinking, right? So it's very important to pay very close attention when you're at that particular point in the experience of meditation, so you don't delude yourself into thinking that you're away from the mental activity when in fact you're just sitting there thinking. I have no doubt that there are probably a lot of people who have been given the instructions to meditate, but they're not very practiced in it, and they sit there thinking that they're not thinking, which is going to go nowhere. That's not going to go anywhere. If you understand the practice of meditation as it relates to the teachings, the understanding that you have as it relates to the teachings is you're trying to go sane. That's what you're doing when you practice meditation. You're practicing going sane, right? If that's true, it means that in the normal state of mind that most people are living life in, that's insane, right? That's an insane state. So what do I mean by that? Do I mean that it's you're insane because you take yourself to be the body that makes you insane? Is it insane because you take yourself to be the thinker of the thoughts? Is that insanity happening? Because even the masters, even the awake beings, right, who taught the non-dual teachings, like Ramana Maharshi or Eckhart Tolle or any of the Rupert Spira, any of the people, right? Even those people, they are identifying themselves as a body and a personality. They're awake. And they are identifying themselves as a body and a personality. So how do you figure that, right? If I just got done saying if you take yourself to be a body and a personality, that's insane, and we're practicing going sane, which means that you experience not being the body or the personality, right? This is very important to understand because it can be easily misunderstood, and if it's misunderstood, you'll get yourself stuck, right? The reason that an awake person, the reason that somebody who is awake considers themselves to be the personality and the body is because it's not insane anymore. It was insane when they thought that was all there is. Do you understand? That's the insanity. It's not that you take yourself as a body that's the insanity, it's that you think that that's all there is. That makes it insane. Okay? So even if you're awake, you still take yourself to be a body, but you know you're not, and you're just using it as transportation. That's a whole different thing. It's a whole different thing. And even if you know you're not the body, right, and you're residing temporarily there, right, that's the human life. Even though you're not the body, but you're using it as transportation in time and space, you're residing temporarily there. That even though you're not the body, you have to practice your way out of the state of mind that is. Otherwise, it isn't going to make any difference. You know, if you've been coming to this class and you've been studying the teachings, you've been reading the books, you've been listening to the teachers and so forth, right? Then you should be developing an understanding of reality through listening to the teachings and studying, reading, and listening to the masters teach. You should be developing an understanding of reality, right? But even after you have that understanding, and that's a pretty good, clear understanding of the way things actually are, it won't make any difference. If you've been coming to the class and you've developed an understanding and you could regurgitate that understanding pretty clearly, right? You could talk about the truth. Yeah. You know who you really are, right? And you're not your body. You could talk about reality. You know what reality is. You know it's consciousness. You can understand the intellectual concepts about the whole thing. You could be very well versed in the truth in terms of the conceptual understandings, and that won't make a bit of difference. That won't make a bit of difference, right? You may use it to be right as a person, you know, you may use it to try and manipulate other people, right? But it won't change the quality of your life. You'll still suffer and you'll still be miserable, right? Because one of the things that has to be understood about all this is that the intellectual understanding is not worth much. You can't use that to escape the suffering. You can't use it because, in fact, it'll make it worse. It'll make it worse because if you think you know the truth because you understand it conceptually and you're still crazy and miserable, right? Then you'll think, oh my God, where do I go now? What do I do now? This is much worse now because I know what's true and it doesn't matter. It's not making any difference. And the reason it's not making any difference is because without the practice, your brain will stay crazy. Without the practice, your brain will stay crazy. It has been conditioned. The conditioning that our brains have gone through is so intense and so thorough, you could talk about it as hypnosis. That would be a legitimate way to talk about it. You know? You're hypnotized to take yourself to be a person and a body. How do I know that? You could even know these truths and you'll still act the same way because your brain will keep producing the same kind of thinking, the same kind of reactions emotionally, and you'll behave off of that. That's what you behave off of, don't you? You behave off of how you feel and what you think. Okay? So no matter what you know in terms of the truth, unless you deal with the database that you're using to live your life, you'll still be behaving crazy. You'll still be acting out your reactions, and your relationships will pay for that. You know, you'll still be interested in and attracted to conflict with other human beings, and it'll make sense to you to be attracted and get involved in that conflict with other human beings. You'll think a lot about it. You'll get into the drama of it. You'll talk to your friends about it, about how these other people are making me crazy, right? Without ever realizing you're victimizing yourself by participating in that mental activity. That's all. You're victimizing yourself by participating in that mental activity. Because that mental activity is a function of a misunderstanding that you are your conditioning. And what's the word conditioning mean? It means that your unique experience of being a human being in a human life, your unique experience of that, the one you had, is the right one. That's what conditioning is. And all of our conditionings are completely different, right? But we live out of that conditioning. We live out of that conditioning as if that conditioning is the truth. The evidence that it's not the truth is so obvious, it's unbelievable. I mean, how evident do you want it to be that what's going on in my mind and what's going on in your mind are different? How obvious? I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? I mean, not only is it pretty obvious, but we use the fact that it's different to fall in love, don't we? How could you fall in love with somebody that was exactly the same as you? That wouldn't make any sense. You wouldn't be attracted to them, right? So the fact that somebody's different from you becomes interesting and attractive and appealing to fall in love, okay? So it's obvious that the mental state is different from person to person. It's not obvious that everybody's operating as if their mental state is the truth, isn't it? In spite of how easy it is to see how obvious that it is the case that your mental state is a very, very, very limited database as it relates to reality in general. Your conditioning is a very, very, very limited database as it relates to reality in general, and you're living out of that in the world. You're living out of that. So everything that happens in the world that's inconsistent with your conditioning upsets you. And if you wake up and you experience your true nature, you get access to well-being. You get access to well-being. And you then will still have to function as a body in the world because that's the game we're all playing, right? And you're still going to have to function as a personality in the world because that's the agreements. Those are the agreements that we're playing by. And when you came into this world, that's what you signed up for, whether you know it or not. You signed up to participate in a very brief experience that'll take place in time and space in which you'll think you're separate from everything else. That's what you signed up for. That's your life. Right? If you think that's all there is and you don't have an understanding beyond your original conditioning, your life will be the life of most human beings. So your conditioning will have you live your life being upset a lot of the time, right? Struggling, being in conflict, coping, putting up with, getting divorces like me, right? Having conflict with your parents, having conflict with your children, having conflict with your neighbors, having conflict with yourself, and that's your life. That goes on day after day after day. And how does this conditioning show up? It shows up where? Yeah, it shows up in the mind. So if you want to see what your conditioning is, all you have to do is start paying attention to your mental activity. That's your conditioning. Right? Most people can't pay attention to their mental activity. You know why?
Because they think they are that.
That's right, because they are their mental activity. How can you pay attention to something you're being? You can't. You have no place to see it from. Yeah. Okay? Not only do you have no place to see it from, but because you're identified with it, you'll die for it. Won't you? Don't they? Don't people die for their mental state? Yeah. If you're right, you could become dead right. So this is the situation that we find ourselves in, right? So the first thing that you have to be able to do in order to deal with your mind is recognize that you're not it. You're not your mind. To recognize that the thoughts that are occurring in your head occur to you as a voice that's playing in your head. And most human beings take that voice to be them thinking. So the first step is to realize that's not me. That voice isn't me. I am not my mind, right? I am not my mind. If you come to understand that one thing, it can open up a whole new realm of possibility. If I'm not that voice, I'm not that voice? Okay, then let me pay attention to that voice and see what that voice is saying. And let me pay attention to that voice and see what that voice is saying and what emotions that's stimulating. And also be aware of what's happening in the world and see if this is a match for what's happening. and you start to pay attention that way, it starts to become clear it's not a match for what's happening. You're rejecting reality a lot of the time. If you wake up in the morning and it's raining and you expected it to be sunny, you just rejected reality. If somebody says something and what they said occurs to you based on your conditioning as an insult, then you're insulted. And you have to deal with them, and you have to deal with that. Even if that wasn't an insult on their part. They didn't intend to insult you at all. So this is the benefit of meditation. You can actually be sane enough to see your mind instead of be your mind. And your mind is behaving according to your conditioning. So anything that happens around you that's not consistent with your conditioning, meaning consistent with what you believe, consistent with what you think, anything that happens around you that's not consistent with that will upset you. Because your expectations are a direct expression of your conditioning, aren't they? Yeah. You expect things to be consistent with your conditioning. You expect things to be consistent with the way you believe things should be. Right? And if you start paying attention to your mental activity, if you're blessed with the opportunity to see your mind instead of be your mind, and you start paying attention to your mental activity, right, you'll get an education about your mind. And what does our Zen teacher say about how to experience well-being? What's the formula for well-being? Your well-being is a function of your relationship to your mind. How does that work? If your mind's crazy, you don't have to be crazy. So you can stay well. You can stay in a state of well-being no matter what the mind's doing, okay? And you're paying attention to the mind, not to reject the mind. The mind, you know, one of the things that makes this difficult is a lot of times people talk about the mind as if it's a person. Oh, it's trying to do this, it's trying to do that. It's not trying to do anything, it's a program. And the program just runs, it just does what the program does, that's all. It's just a program. And there are aspects of the mind that work. There's thinking activity that works, it's practical, right? So we don't want to reject the whole mind, we just want to practice being aware of it so that when the mind is coming from the conditioning that's not consistent with reality, we know that and we don't follow that. If you're having a strong emotional reaction, and that's energy, right? Emotion, energy in motion, right? If you're having a strong emotional reaction and you're awake, right? That energy's been stimulated now, and that energy is circulating in your body as adrenaline, right? But if you're awake, you're not going to follow the direction of the thinking that's going along with the energy, right? So you become present to the truth. You become present to your mind. And when you become present to your mind instead of identifying with it, that energy that got stimulated to produce fight or flight, right, gets transmuted into the energy for presence. That energy changes from energy that is coming up to be used to either fight or run, right? Because you're awake, you're not going to fight and you're not going to run. And the energy's there now, right? So that energy now becomes available for consciousness itself instead of reaction. I heard something the other day that was very, very interesting. One of the ways that the ancient teachers taught meditation is they said if you practice meditation consistently, they used this analogy or metaphor. They said it's like you are a body of salt. Your body is a body of salt. And this body of salt will be walking into the ocean. Now, what will happen to a body of salt walking into the ocean? What? It'll dissolve. This is what happens through the practice of meditation. As you continue to practice, this body of salt starts to experience its relationship to the ocean, the ocean of consciousness, right? As you continue to meditate, this body of salt will begin to dissolve into the ocean of consciousness. So you don't have to wait for the body to die to be free. You don't have to wait for the body to die to experience your true nature. In the analogy of the ocean, we often say that the wave is like the human life. The wave is the ocean, right? But it comes out of the mass of the ocean and expresses itself separate from the ocean as a wave, right? but it's always the same ocean, right? And then at the end, the wave goes back into the ocean. So this is often spoken about the way a human life is. So meditation could be understood that way, that if you keep practicing the way it's meant to be done, and you understand the teachings, right? Gradually, the teachings will start to become realer and truer, and you will begin to experience a sense of freedom, a sense of well-being that's a function of your being awake. It's a function of your seeing your mind instead of being your mind. That'll give you a power. That gives you power. The reason it gives you power is because the word power means that you're able to produce the results in your life that you intend to produce. That's power, isn't it? Yeah. So it gives you power to practice meditation because by practicing meditation, you can intend for the people you love to experience that you love them instead of to experience that you're in conflict with them. That's power, right? I was thinking the other day about this too, about free will. Everybody has a lot of difficulty, or most people have a lot of difficulty accepting and understanding the idea that free will is an illusion, that there's no such thing as free will, right? And you want to continue to believe that you have free will, right? Here's a way of looking at it that might be helpful. If you have free will, what would you use it for? If you have free will, meaning that you could
Live forever.
Become awake, what do you say?
Yeah, if you have free will, what would you use it for? Well, you might try and use it for that, right? But what you would use it for in your more immediate everyday life is you would use your free will to have it be your intention and your will to be loving and kind and have your relationships work, wouldn't you? So how come that's not working if you have free will? People want to argue that they have free will. If you have free will, then how come your life isn't an expression of that free will?